So everybody's been talking about it. Dave Meltzer mostly is the one that reported it, and a lot of people are feeling that maybe Dave Meltzer potentially may have made a big mistake. And that's the fact that he has reported that Chris Jericho, among other top AEW talent, has ensured a lot of folks that, well, CM Punk will not be returning to the company. That's right. That's according to what Dave Meltzer is reporting. As I check to make sure I have the mic on. But yeah. And the reason a lot of people feel that Dave Meltzer may have made a major goof here is because of the fact that Chris Jericho doesn't seem like he's the kind of guy that, despite the fact that he has earned, enough say, or has earned, through hard work and everything, to have enough say and pull behind the scenes at All Elite Wrestling. Nobody believes that Chris Jericho would say something like that when he knows that bringing someone like Punk back in, or keeping someone like Punk and bringing them back in when they're healed, is good for business. I mean, if Chris Jericho felt that way about Punk, and although I know a decade or so makes a difference, he wouldn't have done business with him back in WWE. And that's a fact. He wouldn't have. Now, why would Meltzer say this? Why would Meltzer report this? Well, we know that Chris Jericho did speak out about the fact that he, among others, but mostly himself, wasn't happy with the way CM Punk had conducted himself at the media scrum for All Out. And that he indeed called Punk, a cancer in the locker room. A cancer that needed to be cured, if not subdued. Or basically, I guess in a rant or a rage, he felt need to be removed. Now, despite, Chris Jericho's personal feelings about Punk after what happened with All Out, in the media scrum, like everybody has said, Chris Jericho doesn't seem like he's the kind of guy that would let his personal feelings get in the way of doing what's right for business. And if doing what's right for business is allowing Punk back in to do this storyline with Kenny Omega, to do this storyline with the Young Bucks, with the Elite basically, and Hangman Page, and then maybe extend it to the likes of a Jericho and a JAS, then everybody pretty much feels that Chris would be all for it. And, for Meltzer to come out and say that that's not the case, why would he say it? I mean, we know that Meltzer is close friends with the Elite. There's no doubt. So, is he just saying that because, he wants to protect his friends? Is he throwing, the Wizard himself, the Ayatollah of Rock and Roller, the icon of Chris Jericho under the bus to protect the Elite? We don't know. But we have to remember one other thing. Dave Meltzer works or contributes to an online magazine known as The Observer. Keyword Observer. So what Meltzer is doing by reporting this is he's just reporting what he observes. And by reporting what he observes, he's basically, whether we like it or not, basically giving his own opinion. Like, he's observing, by observing what he's seeing and hearing, he's going off of that and saying, hey, it sounds like Chris Jericho doesn't want him back. This is what I'm hearing and everything. It's not, it's not legit fact. It's just what I'm observing from what I've heard. And I think a lot of people are forgetting that because, Dave has indeed in the past gotten a lot of things right. We know that. And he's also had his share of getting a lot of things wrong. We know that as well. But I think a lot of people getting on Dave Meltzer's case right now for reporting this seem to be forgetting that he's just giving his opinion by, taking what he's observed from observing from the sources given to him. He's just giving an opinion of what he thinks is happening, of what he believes Chris Jericho is trying to do along with other top talent. It doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Now, I'm not sticking up for Dave Meltzer or anything, but Because if what he says is his own belief, and he's trying to get others to believe it, then yeah, Dave, what are you thinking by, spewing that out there? What are you thinking by spewing that out there if you don't know what's the real truth? Why are you, spewing out lies? That's bad for you and your reputation. And by extension, it's also bad for Tony Khan and the company. Because because what Tony Khan right now is trying to do, along with his team, or whatever team he has assembled, is he's trying to basically rebuild the dike that was destroyed thanks to the media scrum. That's what he's trying to do. What? Fine. Sorry for that interruption there, but anyway, like I was saying, why would he, even make these kind of lies and assumptions and all that? Because like I said, not only does it make, him look bad, but by extension it makes Tony Khan look bad and makes AEW look bad. It basically brings back to where I think even JD said, in his extra, his New Year's Day edition of Extra, OTRS Extra, that basically it just brings us back to where we were previously. Where people looked at, Tony Khan as a weak leader, not someone that's, trying to rebuild the dike, as I said before the interruption. He's trying to rebuild things and make Dynamite, Rampage, and by extension Rampage, and even further by extension Ring of Honor, into what we used to know and love about it. So, why would he do this and say all this? And you can't tell me that TK probably ain't hearing about this and probably thinking to himself, okay, Dave, what's the big deal? Why would you say that? I'm trying to fix things. Me and my team are trying to make things right again. Why would you say that? And, one could assume, in my opinion, that it's mainly Dave's way of protecting his guys. Like, maybe Dave's afraid, just in my opinion. But maybe Dave's afraid of the fact that that CM Punk, despite not being there as long as Omega and the Bucks and Paige have, maybe he's afraid that Punk might have a little bit more influence than they do. That maybe he has Tony Khan's ear a lot more than anybody else, and maybe he's worried that if CM Punk comes back, he's gonna, display that influence, not just visually on screen, but behind the scenes as well, to make sure every time he and FTR and anybody else that associates with him in this story, against the Elite, come out on top. Whether it's clean, controversial or not, they always come out on top. And I think that's what he's afraid of. But because by extension, by doing something like that, maybe what DM is feeling and believing, if he does feel that this is true that he's reporting about Chris Jericho, maybe he feels that if CM Punk comes back and, like I said, displays that influence that makes him and whoever he's associated with go over the Elite, that by doing so, it's going to make the Elite look like everything Punk said they were. Children, people that are not ready for the positions that they've been put in, and stuff like that. And he doesn't want that. He doesn't want them to go through that or be showcased like that, because then it'll basically reverberate across, all wrestling, like, yeah, the Elite is exactly what everybody said they were. They're nothing more than marks for themselves. They are their own biggest fans, and they have yet to grow up and accept that, you have to, put people over. You got to do things the right way, and do the journey properly to get to the top, and not just, make your own company because you are too afraid to swim in the more shark-infested waters or something. I don't know. But that's just my opinion as to why, if it's true that Dave believes what he reported as fact, about Chris Jericho, then what I just mentioned is my opinion as to why I believe he did it. Because I do agree that despite how Chris Jericho might feel about Punk and what he did at the, in the media after the media scrum, or during the media scrum, I don't think, I don't think Chris Jericho is that so much of a egocentric maniac that he would allow his personal feelings for the way Punk, embarrassed the company to cloud his judgment on what's good for business, what's good to put the, to allow and put the company over the top. I don't think he would allow his egocentric, pride to, get in front of that. Because if that was the case, he wouldn't have put over the Action Andretti, if you will. He wouldn't have put over Action Andretti. He wouldn't have put over Claudio, the way he did. He wouldn't have put over Kingston. If he had such of an ego, he wouldn't have done any of that. Despite how he might feel about each and every one of those people, he wouldn't have done none of that. Cole Cabana, he wouldn't have said, hey, give me Cole Cabana. He wouldn't have done that. Even though he said, yeah, I'm going to go over Cole Cabana, his egocentric pride wouldn't let him bring in Cole Cabana because Cole was basically the reason a lot of this is going on. So I do believe that Chris Jericho would not be the kind of person that would allow what's good for business and what could potentially put AEW over the top, even more so over WWE, than a storyline like Punk, FTR, and whoever else against the Elite, and maybe by extension later on, Jericho and the JAS. I don't think he would allow his egocentric pride, to put that, indefinitely on the shelf. He's a business. At the end of the day, he's a businessman, and he would do what's right for business. I mean, think about it this way: when Eric Bischoff wanted to do the NWO, and he brought in Scott Hall, he brought in Kevin Nash. Yeah, those were big. That was a big impact in its own right, and everybody was believing, even up until Great American Bash, and even afterwards, that these guys were from WWE. They were still under WWE contracts, and they were coming down to invade. Until that was kind of clarified at the Great American Bash of '96 that wasn't the case. But still, again, people didn't believe it, and still saw them as working for Vince, being allowed to come down and try to wipe out WCW. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the original consideration for a turncoat was going to be Sting. But here's the problem. Even though Sting was a big name, in the ranks of WCW, and him turning on WCW, his home, organization, and joining with Hall and Nash, it would have been a big deal, but it wouldn't have made the impact necessary to put WCW over the top, or to show that WCW was on par, was equal to WWE, if not better. So that's why Bischoff went with Hogan. And despite the stories you might believe about Hogan kind of being reluctant at first, but then realizing, hey, this might be something, in the long run, as far as, the history, as far as the historical course of pro wrestling goes in the future, despite who you might believe, Hogan, he jumped on it. He jumped on board with it. Despite, as I was trying to say, him being reluctant of it at first. Again, despite, depending on what side of the story you believe on that, he jumped on it. He saw the historical significance that it would, in impact it was going to probably make if he was indeed the third guy. Because, yeah, like I said, Sting would have made an impact, but it may have been more like a territorial, regional impact than anything else. It wouldn't have made the impact that Hogan's association with Hall and Nash and the NWO made. And by Hogan jumping on board finally and allowing that to happen and making that a reality, what happened for 2.5 years? Huh? What happened for 2.5 years? Well, not 2.5 years, but what happened for nearly 2 years, a year and a half? What happened? WCW dominated WWF. You know, Hogan being the one to join Hall and Nash, formed a new world order, and put them over the top. It put them not just on par and equalness with WWE, but it made them surpass WWE. To the point that it made WWE change its strategy and go in a more adult-centric direction, just to basically catch back up with WCW and then eventually surpass them themselves. And when I look at someone like Chris Jericho, I do agree that he's the kind of guy that may not like Punk personally, but he's not going to let his pride and his disdain for the person get in the way of what could be a great business decision of allowing Punk to come back, associate with team up with FTR and whoever else against the Elite, because by allowing that to happen, and then later on like I said earlier, by extension Jericho and the JAS, by allowing that to happen, you could end up creating a moment that's almost on par to the Hogan, Hall, and Nash NWO situation back at Bash at the Beach in 1996. And I'm not talking like creating an NWO stable. No, I'm talking about a moment that will get people to tune in to Wednesday nights more so than they would Mondays and Fridays, just because they want to see what's happening. It'll get people talking more about what happened on Dynamite and by extension Rampage than what's going on Raw than on Raw and SmackDown. You see what I'm saying? So I do agree that I don't think Chris Jericho is the kind of person that would let his egotistical pride get in the way of what would be a great business move that could potentially help AEW not just get equally on par with WWE, but by a slight margin surpass them. I don't think he's that kind of person, despite how he might feel about CM Punk. And that's why, I could see why people are upset with Dave Meltzer when he's coming out and reporting that Jericho and other top athletes are trying to make sure that, Punk doesn't show back up. Because by doing so, Dave Meltzer is making Tony Khan and the company of AEW look bad, and in a way making Chris Jericho look bad for something that maybe he has nothing to do with. I mean, again, yeah, he did vocalize how he felt about Punk doing what he did and everything, and that's his opinion. Those are his feelings. Those are his opinions. Nobody's going to deny him that. But he's not the kind of person that's just going to let that let those feelings manifest to the point that he's not going to do business when he knows the business that he could be doing or allowed to be done and then be doing himself by extension could help the company get to that next level. I mean, again, you look at the fact that they were doing the stadium show this year in the UK, at the stadium, potentially at the soccer stadium of the Premier League team that the Khans own, back, later this year, around the time that Punk could already be back. I mean, imagine the business they're going to be able to do by selling out that 30,000 to 40,000 seat, venue with the headline match of Punk versus Omega, or Punk FTR against Omega and the Bucks, or Punk FTR and whoever else they get against, the Elite altogether, that being, Omega, the Bucks, and Page. Who's to say, who's to say that's not going to sell out? Who's to say that's not going to be a great business move in a potential major sellout overseas, and then by extension later on here in the States when they come back, if not before then. Again, I just cannot see Chris Jericho not allowing that to happen. And even in his thing, if what Meltzer said is true, which again a lot of people feel is not the case, it makes it sound like Jericho's running things more so than Khan. I mean, yeah, Tony Khan might go to Chris Jericho, as many have pointed out, and get his advice of like, okay, should I sign this guy? Should I do this? Should I do that? And Chris will give him his opinion, But I just don't think Chris is the kind of person that would tell Tony Khan, no, do not allow CM Punk in here. I don't care whether or not it's good for business or, okay, let me rewind that. All right. What I'm trying to say is I don't think Chris Jericho is the kind of person that would tell Tony Khan, do not let CM Punk back in here. I don't care whether or not it's good for business or it isn't. I do not want him here, neither does anybody else. I don't think Chris Jericho is that kind of person. I think Chris Jericho is the kind of person that's willing to put his differences with someone like CM Punk aside to do what's right for business. And if he knows, like I said, that, Omega versus Punk, FTR versus the Bucks, a blood and guts match between both sides is good for business and could help them get equally on par, if not slightly surpass WWE, and get people talking more about what's going on Dynamite, and by extension Rampage, than what's going on Raw and SmackDown, then I think Chris Jericho would be okay with it. And if by extension him and his group, get involved in this, then that's a plus for him, in the long run. That's a plus for him in the long run. So I have to look at what Dave Meltzer's saying here and reporting here, and I do have to take it with a major grain of salt. But I also have to look at it, like I said, it's Dave Meltzer just doing what he's associated with, doing the job of what he's associated with. He's just observing what he sees and hears, and going by that observation of what he sees and hears, he's kind of putting together what he believes is going on behind the scenes. Now, if I'm Meltzer, I will come out and I will try to clarify that. I will try to come out, if I'm Meltzer, I come out and clarify, look, you misinterpreted me. What I meant to say, or what I was trying to say, is this is what I feel is going on by observing what I've heard and seen. Not saying that that's exactly what's happening, but by my own observedness, of hearing and reading and seeing what's happening, that's what I believe is potentially going on, but I could be wrong. That's what he needs to do. He needs to come out and say that that's just his opinion. That's what he believes could be going on, but he could be wrong. And if I'm Chris Jericho, I also come out and I verify whether or not what he's saying is true. If I'm Chris Jericho, I say, look, I don't know what Meltzer's talking about, but I have nothing to do with this, and even come out and somewhat clarify that maybe that he would be cool with Punk coming back, because he knows, a Punk FTR feud with the Elite would be great business and would get people talking more about Dynamite and by extension Rampage than anything else, and that maybe by association later on it'd be getting them talking more about Rampage and Dynamite again, more so, and as well as talking about Jericho and the JAS, once they get involved. So to me, I just do not see someone like like Chris Jericho, I should say. I just do not see someone like him, coming out and saying something like this. I think, again, this is just based on what Dave Meltzer is observing from what he's heard, read, and seen, and just putting together his own opinion of what he believes could be going on, but maybe he's wrong. And that's the thing. He hasn't come out and said that it's his opinion and that he could be wrong about this. And he needs to correct himself in that department. He does. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Do you believe anything Meltzer has said about this? Do you think Chris Jericho is the kind of person that would prevent it from happening? Or do you think or do you think Meltzer is just giving his own opinion, but he hasn't stated that as such, and he needs to correct that, as I mentioned? And do you think Jericho would be okay with this happening, knowing that it would get people talking about AEW and probably allow AEW to get on equal par, if not slightly surpass WWE, in popularity and in viewership, and get people talking more about what's going on Dynamite and Rampage than Raw and SmackDown? Do you think Jericho would be that kind of a person, knowing that even by extension he could be involved later on as well? What are your thoughts? Let me know down below in the comments, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video, and I'll talk to you later.